Hi and welcome to CSM TAC. I'm Peter Briggs and today we're going to be talking about leadership styles. Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about leadership styles and how leadership styles develop your team and how they are an important factor of self-awareness. The question that I always ask my learners is, does your team develop the leader or does the leader develop the team? And I think leadership styles often tell us which way the leader wants to lead and therefore how the team wants to react to that. And we're going to go through a number of different theories. We've even got the British Army's leadership code to go through today as well, and how they see leadership. And I think a lot of people will look at the British Army and just think the leadership in the British Army is very one-dimensional, but it's not. The fact is that the British Army has a large facet of leaders in every single department, and because it's all walks of life, the British Army pulls people from every single walk of life, and therefore there are many different leaders. And the traditional the Sergeant Major being shouting at his recruits, that's portrayed on TV, especially post Second World War, is probably something that we want to pull away from a British Army's perspective, but also something that we can learn from, in that sometimes that does need to be the way that leadership works. So let's get on with the rest of the session. So the aims of the video today are to talk about the different theories of leadership. We're going to talk about a number of specific ones. Lewin is particularly one. We'll go through 6 emotional leadership styles and the British Army's leadership code. We're then going to talk about how that influences your team, how that develops and how affects your team. We'll then comprehend your leadership style. Well, I'll ask that question, what your leadership style is, and then you can make some assumptions. And I'll hopefully direct you to some places that you can go and have a look at and see if you find your leadership style there. And then also we'll talk about what will make you a better leader, what behaviours will help you become a better leader. So what is a leadership style? Well, a leadership style is just the way that you portray yourself in a way that other people's either listen to you or take your lead from. There is a saying, do as I say, don't do as I do. That technically is a leadership style, not a particularly good one, not something that I think a lot of people should follow, especially nowadays, but that still is a leadership style. You've got many different types, and some of the theories either show you what types of leadership you may be, or what types you might want to be in the future, or what you feel is the best leadership style for you. And often that's the question that comes to the fore most often, is that does the leader shape the team as its leadership style grows, or does the team or does the leader shape the team's leadership? I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of this. It's a bit like chicken and the egg, and the question, is a leader born or is it created? Often I think it's a mixture of the two. The leader informs the team of how that leadership wants to work, and then the team then informs the leader how it wants to be led. But in between that, there becomes some sort of analysis or hypothetical thought process from the leader and the team itself to grow either together and then knit nicely and create a performing as team, or do they pull apart and become more of a storming team as they develop? And we will get onto the performing storming element on a later video, but first and foremost we've got to look at yourself, and that's why self-analysis and self-awareness is probably more important at this stage. So we're going to just discuss some of the different types of leadership styles. We're going to go with a path goal theory promulgated in the 1970s. You've got the Lewin leadership style from the 30s, which pretty much just sets the stall out for a lot of our leadership understanding. We've got the 6 emotional leadership styles, and they don't really inform us what leadership is, but it sort of pigeonholes people, and I think a lot of it is about crossover between all those emotional different styles. Then you've got the British Army's leadership style, leadership code, sorry. And what we'll see there is an understanding of how you've taken Kurt Lewin's theory, and then they've put it onto a scale mixed in with their almost the codes and ethics and morals of the British Army itself. And so you've got a sliding scale, and we'll talk through that sliding scale process. And then we've got some more specific learner styles, which are probably fall outside of any of the other theories, but are prevalent, and so therefore we should have just a quick look at them and see how they all work. So path goal theory is more associated, for me anyway, in the individual projects. Something that I think you can use to galvanise a team that's been thrown together in order to achieve a single objective or a small number of objectives, rather than an encompassing leadership style that a leader should employ over a long period of time, creating and melding a team together or over a long period of time. The path goal theory does have some really important elements to it, though, and I don't. Well, that's why I wanted to talk about it, really, because I think that as a singular leadership style, I think it's really helpful. And once you start putting that into a larger leadership understanding, then you can start using it on individual projects or for individual people. And so the theory goes around talking about the responsibilities of the leader. So it helps the team understand and achieve their goals. It clears away all the objectives, all the obstacles in the way of the team itself. So instead of placing problems for the team, it tries to remove those problems for the team to streamline that pathway through to clear leadership. And it also offers rewards along the way. And so those rewards are there to provide, it's the carrot technically, so there's no stick, it's all carrot. So the leadership styles that support path goal theory are the following: supportive leadership, which provides an understanding of relationships with your team members, developing leadership relationships with each member of your team and the team as a whole, providing them support throughout the project. You've got a directive leadership, and that's very task orientated, one single task, one single goal, everyone's working together to go and achieve that goal. Then you've got leadership with participation, so it's about helping the team develop a core understanding, decision making understanding, from where the team wants to go or where that project needs to go. So that team works together in order to achieve its goal because it's made that decision itself. And this works really well with sports teams as well. Whenever I work with, say, Salford City or Burnley FC, where there are academies, I ask about the values and standards that team has got, and often it's been directed from the coaches or above. But the best sort of decisions are made by the group, because what happens is the group starts to police itself, and those decisions then become an ethos more than something that's being directed. It becomes more important to the team because it's their decision in the first place. And then you've got a team, achievement orientated leadership. So that's bite-sized chunks of achievements or tasks or endpoints that you can just supplement all the way through your course, and gives everyone a sense of success at every step of the way. So you've got these 6 emotional leadership styles, and this is a good theory to shape a leader. I think you need to have all these different types of leadership throughout the course of your career and the course of your life. But I don't think that anyone just sits in one of these. I think as emotions move anyway, you'll move through these different stages. And so there's a number of these different stages. What they want to say is you pigeonhole into one of these types. And as we will discuss towards the end of the video, is that leadership isn't about just having one type. If you have one type of leadership, it grows very old very quickly. Therefore, you should be able to mix and match your leadership style in order to achieve the aims that your team wants and that you need to achieve. So visionary leader is somebody that is someone to follow, someone that says, come with me and I'll take you through to the other side. We'll achieve our aims together. Somebody that is very direct, off the cuff, instinctive. They use empathy, they use initiative in order to achieve their aims. It's not someone sat behind a desk, it's not someone that directs other people to do stuff, it's somebody that leads by example. The British Army has a large amount of individuals like this, especially at corporal and sergeant level. If you look back to the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts, you had a lot of people who were not of old age, but led by pure ability to go and do the job together. You followed them because you trusted them with your life. The British Army has been really good on this, but there are plenty of other types of leaders in other worlds that follow the same sort of thought process. If you look at football or sport, it's those sort of visionary leaders. You can imagine them at half time and you're 2-0 down in a game, and he's the one that's saying, right, follow me, I will get us through this. Do this with me, and I will provide us with the ability to go and do it. These people normally have a lot of quality in order to do their job in the first place, and everyone follows them because they trust themselves. The coaching leader is next. This is somebody that would provide coaching and mentoring in order to facilitate leadership. So maybe do it this way. This is something you could do. See what works for you. This is the sort of attitude that a coaching leadership would have. They would provide team members with individual goals and set their values in order to make them understand where they need to go and make them better as a result of that, the coaching itself. A lot of this is to do with personality. A lot of it has to be with their coaching ability in the first place. You've got to be able to trust what they're telling you in the first place. So that experience and understanding has to be there. You wouldn't trust someone to be a scuba diver when they've never scuba dived before. So that's not really a coaching mechanism. So you've got to have some experience in that world in the first place. And that's when that leadership comes out, because they're saying, I've tried these, I've done the mistakes, and you can learn from my mistakes. Try this, try that. Not too dissimilar to how most leaders work in the football coaching world as it is, because they've already been there, they've already got some achievement, and then you're listening to them and understanding what went right for them and what went wrong for them. Affiliative leadership is often associated with developing the team after conflict. It's somebody that the team comes first, the individuals come first, working as a collective. So this is very emotionally driven, it's very motivational driven, but it's also very individual driven. And so what you're trying to do is just try and give that team a little bit of TLC, especially after a bit of conflict or a little bit of an argument or after a storming session, which may be that people didn't feel like that they've got their points over or had their voices heard. Giving them an understanding of how you can provide that arm around the shoulder will help them develop as an individual. Not always going to be possible, especially when you've got tight deadlines and you're working towards key objectives. Sometimes you just have to just feed this in at certain stages just to develop individuals. And like I said earlier, it's not about having a one cap fits all. This can't work if you're not able to change your hats to make sure that you are a different leader to each individual. You are the leader that they require every single time that they walk through that door in the morning. A democratic leader is somebody that asks the team their opinion, gathers that information, and then makes an answer out of that. This is great. This is really good leadership style, if time permits. Sometimes this cannot always work. You can't be a democratic leader if time doesn't permit. Remember, time is the undefeated enemy. If you've ever got any tight deadlines, then being a democratic leader sometimes prevents you from getting the answer that you need to have, because you've got to ask too many questions, you're going to ask too many people. If you have time, then a democratic leader makes everyone feel like they've got a voice, they've got an understanding, and that they're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So it's very empowering, very much motivational, but also can damage your decision-making process if you haven't got the time to do so. A pace-setting leader is somebody that drives the team. It's very goal orientated. You do not have time for people who cannot keep up with you. You are going towards your goal, and you will achieve it. You drive forward, and all those people that can follow, great, get on board. We're going now. Everyone that can't, get left behind. And so you've got to have pace setting as a leadership trait. You've got to have that ability to go and achieve that aim, and those high performing individuals that you have in your team will love pace setting leaders. However, if you've got some people in your team that aren't quite as good as you, or aren't quite as good as other members of your team, then this could be very daunting, because they are no longer being supported, they're being dragged along, and they don't feel comfortable. So therefore, give them the opportunity. Pace setting is really good for tight deadlines. Come on, do as I say right now, let's go, but then have some consideration for other people. The commanding leader. This probably we'll come across this quite a few times now. The different type of leader is do what I tell you right now. This sometimes gets pinged against the British Army's way of dealing with leadership, and we will talk about that when we talk about transactional and transitional leadership in the British Army. And there is a time and place for all of that. Tight deadlines, really important to just do what you're told and get it done as quickly as possible. But this doesn't really give your team much scope in growth, and it doesn't give them an opportunity to talk through their problems, maybe some of these solutions that they could find. You don't give them time to do that. You're just telling them the answer. This sort of leader doesn't really work well with growth or development of their team, but they can be really good if you've got a big problem and it needs to be solved very quickly. That sort of leadership comes into its fore, and that's why, although it's probably not a great leadership style consistently, because people get tired of this very, very quickly, it can, in small bursts, when things really matter, they can be really useful. So now we move on to Llewellyn's leadership style, and often this is a really big subject, and a lot of our leadership styles are driven out of Lewin's theory, and he sort of builds three types of leadership styles, and then instead of being pigeonholed, you're sort of on a sliding scale between them. And I think you know you've got your autocratic and laissez-faire, and then you've got your democratic in the middle. And you sort of, as you swing between the three, that would depend on the sort of team that you have. So if you are a high performing team, then you might be laissez-faire. If you have a low performing team, or a very newly formed team with no experience, then you might be very autocratic in style. And therefore, it'll be this swing all the way through that your leadership style will alter. So you're altering your leadership style to technically the team in this theory. So the authoritarian style, which we start off here, is very much like that last style we spoke about in the 6 emotional leadership styles. Authoritarian, very much do what I tell you to do right now. This is a great way to build a very early forming team in order just to get them to start working in the way that you want them to be working. You've often got this sort of idea that a autocratic leader is Sergeant Major shouting at people on a parade square, or maybe a big boss in a CEO in a large corporation shouting at his employees just to go and do what they're being told to do. That's not often the case. You might get recruits first into the British Army feel like they're working in an autocratic leadership style, but what you'll find is that it's not quite as autocratic as you would think. Because there's a lot of growth for those individuals as they go along. The growth is the shouting. The growth is that understanding of what happens if it goes wrong. So the autocratic leadership style can be used in a learning style itself, but sparingly, because often it wears very thin very quickly, and actually you don't achieve the aims that you need to achieve often because there's too much stick and not enough carrot. So autocratic it's a leadership style that you can use in order to facilitate small, short-term tasks, something that's very immediate. I always think of autocratic being, you're in a position where the enemy's firing on your location, and you just need to get through the next 10 minutes just so then you can survive. Autocratic leadership at that moment in time is exactly what you need it to be. Just get up, do what I tell you to do, and you will live. You will get through this. If you had a democratic style that point, or then a participative style at that point, then you end up with this idea that you'd be sat there forever trying to make up a decision, because some people won't like it and some people will like it, and you'll never make a consensus. That's when you need the autocratic leader. You need someone just to say, shut up, get this done now, I'm telling you, go and do it, and give them a boot, technically. But then the other side of that is that a lot of people don't want to be autocratic and end up wanting to be more democratic or laissez-faire. But that's not how leadership works in a lot of workplaces. You always tend to fall closer to autocratic rather than democratic. So, for example, when you walk onto your floor plate and you're handing out work, you're not asking their opinion, you're just firing out the work that needs to be done. You've been told to do it, therefore you're telling everyone else to do it. That's not really democratic. You're no longer involving them in the decision-making process. You're actually being very autocratic here. So a lot of people will say that they're not autocratic. They'll probably sit more democratic, but in actual fact, a lot of the work that we do is autocratic because we just get told to do it, and that's what we need to do. Lewin's democratic leadership style is somebody that can go out and find out the decision-making process of their team, to find out their answers. It's very much team-orientated, very much goal-orientated for the team. You are there talking to the team and asking them, what do you think? How would you attack this? Now, this is very teacher-orientated. So when you're sat in a classroom, instead of giving them the answers, the teacher needs to draw those answers out of them. You give them the answers in a roundabout way and then ask them to sort of come up with their own solution. Democratic only works if you actually take that decision forward. A lot of people like to be involved in the process, but then they'll still make the decision that they made in the prior, or they're confirming it. And we'll talk about confirmation and the way that we work our decision-making processes out in a later video, when we start talking about decision-making and problem-solving. But what you've got to be really careful of here is that you feel like them giving you the answer that you wanted and not the answer that they're actually giving you. And so democratic is very, very, there's certain skills you need to portray. The skills that listening skills, active listening being one of the most important skills here, and being able to understand the information that they're trying to give you. Democratic leadership is often about giving your team the ability to give you the answers. But if you are not listening to those answers correctly, not taking that information on, then you don't fall inside this leadership style. So I probably have to apologize to any French speakers here, because laissez-faire for me, well, with a Burnley accent, it sounds awful. So I do apologize to any French speakers out there. This is a leadership style that gives all the authority to the team. Delegation is key here. Delegating, not responsibility, just the tasks. The leader still takes the responsibility. The leader cannot offshoot the responsibility to his team. They cannot say, well, they said they'd do this. Because that's no leadership at all. There's no leadership whatsoever in that. Throwing your team under the bus will not support you as being a leader whatsoever. So laissez-faire is more about giving the team the authority to do what they need to do and make their decisions that they need to make. This is really great in a high-performing team. You just get the team to go on. And I always think about this as being the F1 Formula One team that sorts out the vehicle as it comes into its pit stop. No one's overarching. No one's telling everyone what to do, or make sure you drill that hole first, and make sure you put that bolt in next. No one's telling them that. They all know their job. They all know what they need to do. They just get on with it. You give them decisions. If they need to do that first, then they go and do that first. Time is really important, but their high performing team knows exactly what they need to do. Now, if you're a leader of a team that's very specialist, dealing with a specialist subject, and you've got specialists in your team, then this sort of leadership style is really great. Let them come up with their decisions. I'd rather be involved in the decision making process, but I might not have an opinion. Just listening to those sort of leaders, those sort of team members, understanding where their decision making process is going to be, will help me later on become a better leader. So then I can sort of interject with a little bit more information. But let those individuals who are really high performing get on with their task. Don't stop them and ask them to quantify it, because that will drive them lower in their production, their products output. So bring it back, let them get on with it, and then just reap the rewards. So we'll now move on to the British Army's Leadership Code, and underpinning the Army's Leadership Code, because there's a number of levels to this. So we're going to try and break through the different levels of the Leadership Code. So underlying themes to this is the vision, the support, and the challenge elements. So the vision is about having somebody who provides a vision for a team, creates shared goals and understanding. This can be through communication, documentation, or verbally, or actually role modeling. So somebody that can say, follow me, I'm going to be able to do this. So that's where providing that vision, that understanding of how the team is inspired. Then you've got the support element. So each of your team members needs to be supported and provided with understanding, so then they can grow as individuals. This is to be fair and consistent throughout, and you've got to show confidence in the team and the team elements and the team individuals. And then the challenge phase. The Army Leadership Doctrine actually talks about how people can grow as part of being challenged. And I probably agree with that to a certain extent. When people are faced with challenge, that's when you actually see where their leadership comes out. So having a challenge element to the underpinning theme is really important. How do you challenge your individuals? And what stages can you ramp that challenge up to provide them with more of a sterner challenge, an understanding of where that challenge leads them to, some sort of achievement at the conclusion of that challenge as well. So the Army's taken Lewin's idea of having an autocratic and democratic leader and used the wording transformational and transactional leaders. And it puts them on a sliding scale, which we'll talk about later, because it's got different elements of its code entwined on that scale itself. But at the very ends, you've got this transactional and transformational leader. Where you sit on that slide will depend on the circumstances and what you're trying to achieve. And so the British Army is just trying to give you a steer into where you sit at any one moment. We're going to talk about transformational. This is more of the coaching style that we had before in the 6 emotional leadership styles, or the the democratic leader in Lewin's leadership style. This is about emotion, understanding, connecting with each of your team members, bringing out the best of them individually, but empowering to do so as well. It's not quite fully allowing them to make all the decisions, so it's not laissez-faire, but you are allowing them input into that decision-making process. You are going to have an all-encompassing vision that they are partly involved in. You're going to ask them their input, you're going to trust their input, you're going to trust the way that they want to do their job. But then you're going to provide them with the oversight and the umbrella. If it all starts going wrong, then you're going to take it for them, and you're not going to leave them out in the cold. Transactional is obviously the other side of the scale to the transformational that we just discussed about. So it's very autocratic, very much do as I say, very quick, very discipline orientated, and it's very time orientated. So the more important and quick the decision needs to be made, the more autocratic you end up being, and therefore more transactional rather than transformational. This is more for the scenarios in the leadership code anyway. It's about discipline, it's about reward, it's about being very set in stone about what you're going to achieve and what you're not going to achieve. If you look on the battlefield about how a transactional and transformational leader should be, I'd hope that in really serious situations, then you're going to be more transactional rather than transformational. I always think about leadership styles. I always lead back to a book on the Colchester Six, who were murdered in Iraq back in 2003. And I just think back to Sergeant H.J., who was the sergeant who was running the section at the time, and he had an opportunity to get away. And the interpreter had shown him a way out. There was a way out through the back window. He'd had a section of 5 other individuals in the team, and they'd been surrounded by a large group of disaffected locals who had been very roughly treated by the British Army previously, and didn't like the fact that the British Army was there in the first place. And this is probably one of the turning points to the Iraq conflict, where the population started to turn against the British army. We were seen as liberators when we first went in, but now, as time had gone on and we were starting to impose almost a westernized rule, and we wanted to create a democracy for these individuals, we wanted to change their way of life and stop oppression of other individuals, especially the weak. Then other people started to take up arms against us. We had Jam, who wanted to take up arms anyway, and therefore we have this powder keg in Alamara, which had pretty much been left by Saddam Hussein throughout his tenure as in charge of Iraq. And we were there trying to help and support people and bring them on, and they didn't really want it. They wanted to live their life as they wanted to live. They were tribal, and they didn't like the idea of having these Westerners, these Brits, come along and tell them how they should live their life. It became a powder keg, became a big problem, and the RMP there were trying to help the local police. We'd go down and support the local police how to do their job, and give them advice on how to do policing, train them efficiently to become better policemen rather than just bouncers at a local bar who use very, very brutal tactics. And instead we try to bring them into the 21st century in the ways of policing. So they were there trying to teach these police officers, and this mob descended on the police station and attacked it. And HJ had this opportunity to leave, and he didn't. He stayed with his team. And I just think back to that leadership code when and I always think about that situation. What I would do in that situation, would I have made the same decision? I hope I would have made that same decision. I think if anybody knows me, they would probably say I would stay with my team, and I'm eternally proud of HJ for his actions that day. I'm proud of all the team members that day who all sadly lost their lives, including HJ, but particularly that individual, because he had that opportunity to leave. He didn't take it. He stayed with his team, even if it meant his own death. So the British Army's leadership code has this acronym, leaders. So lead by example, encourage thinking, apply reward and discipline, demand high performance, encourage confidence in the team, recognise individual strengths and weaknesses, and strive for team goals. It's a struggle to say that's an acronym for leaders, It's not quite sea drills, and it's not quite an understanding. It's not succinct. However, it still gets its thought process over. And what we'll see in a minute is that they put this on that sliding scale between transformational and transactional leaders, and where each one of these elements lie. So you need to uphold each element of the leadership code by being able to span both the transformational to the transactional leader. And I think that's the leadership code in a nutshell. It gives you the framework, it tells you where you can sit and where you should sit when you're dealing with certain circumstances. So, for example, if we're leading by example, you're going to be very transformational at that point. Whereas if you are applying reward and discipline, you're going to be transactional. And so we'll have a look in that detail. So you can see the scale here. So you've got your transactional on the left hand side and your transformational on the right hand side. And as you can see, the leader acronym is then basically split across the spectrum of that leadership scale. So at the top end, you've got applied discipline, because you're expected to be very transactional when you're dealing with discipline. There can be no give or take. You have to be consistent and you have to be direct. Same for reward. You shouldn't be rewarding certain individuals with more praise than other individuals. You shouldn't be basically patting more people on the back than because they're your friends or they're people that you work with on a regular basis. So therefore, you have to be very transactional at that point. Very much clear cut, very direct. And as you move down the scale, you'll see that we move towards that lead by example element of the transformational leadership. You'll see the demand high performance, probably a little low for me, more middle ground, but I think that's more about having that you should always demand high performance, that every team should always be striving to be better. That you recognize individual strengths and weaknesses. You should be working with your team to see what your weaknesses and strengths are, and then complementing them with other team members. So if somebody is really weak in certain areas, then you use the strengths of others to help them, to bolster them in the right positions. Strive for those team goals. I think that probably goes with high performance, but on this scale, it sits more towards the transformational area. And the encouraged thinking is definitely something transformational. I feel that's probably further up the scale than where it currently is. But that's how the British Army sort of structures its leadership code, sets the groundwork of its vision, then with its underpinning vision and challenge and support, it then provides them with a framework, which is the leader's acronym. And then on the scale between the transactional and the transformational, and where you sit. And what the leadership code for me says is that you should be able to span both sides of that spectrum, in line with what is our leadership styles. There's a website, mindtools.com, that has a really good questionnaire. It uses the Lewin theory, where you can just challenge yourself. It's 12 simple questions. It does pigeonhole. It does fit you in a box. And again, it's not context driven, which is a lot of this. I don't like theory when it sort of pigeonholes you. You can certainly get a feel for how you might react to certain situations. But just because you feel you might make that decision, or you would like to make that decision, doesn't mean that you make that decision in real life. The only real way you can see what sort of leader you are is when you're in the mix, when you're actually in that position and you're actually making those key decisions. Are you autocratic or are you democratic? Are you transactional or transformational? That sort of individual, you can only learn that by being in those positions, in those situations, and learning at that moment in time. What I will also say is that you should be able to explain what you want to be as leader. Now, this is part of your own personal development. You might not be there right now, but you might want to be there in the future. So how do you want to lead? Do you want to be transformational, or do you want to be transactional? Do you want to be able to swap Do you want to be able to move between the different areas in order to facilitate the best leadership for each of the team members that you have? Or do you want to be quite constant? I want to just be a transactional leader and everyone else can just follow what I tell them to do. I think you're probably cutting off your nose to spite your face there, but that's some ways that might work for you. But it won't work in other ways. And also the last question really is I really want to ask is, how do you want to be led? How do you feel your leader should be? Should they be impartial? Should there be somebody that puts their arm around you and helps you to get over your problems? Or do you just want them to show you the way? This is often the way that a good leader should be able to see leadership in other individuals, should be able to take on those little aspects from different leaders and incorporate them into their own leadership style itself. So when you see somebody doing something good in a way that you think, I like that, I'm going to take that, I'm going to put that into myself. Or I don't like that, I'm going to stay away from that in the future. So how do you want to be led? Put all your comments below. I'd love to read them. I'd love to understand what your experiences are with leadership styles as well. From my own perspective about leadership, I always like the idea that I can mix my leadership up. I can be autocratic or I can be democratic. The circumstances demand me, that they make demands of me and my team. I can change, and I'm a chameleon in order to facilitate the end product. If my team wants me to be more autocratic, I can be more autocratic. If they want me to be more democratic, I can bend that way as well. I mix it up. I change the way that I am in order to facilitate and get the best out of all my team members, and also to achieve the aim. You cannot forget that some leaders, their whole objective is to get to the end point. The team needs to get to the end point. And therefore, your leadership style changes as a result of that. I would also say, while mixing everything up, is that you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent to those individuals. They want to be able to trust you and be able to come to you, and you're not moving between transitional and transactional when you're meeting them. They want to see that same person. They might not see the same person you are with other team members, but they want to see the same person that they meet on a constant basis. So if they feel like they have a voice and you take that voice away, then they're no longer feeling that you've got their confidence and that you are being consistent. So therefore, you need to understand what leadership style you use for each of those individuals and be consistent with those individuals. And last but not least is to be honest. Be honest with yourself and be honest with your team. If you're out of your depth and your team is there to support you, be honest with them. Get them to be the conduit that gets you to the end point. That's laissez-faire. Be more democratic. But also, if you are confident and you know the answer and you're going to get them there, then show them the way, especially if they're a low-performing team. Be honest with your individuals. Be honest with yourself to get to where you need to get. So that's the conclusion of today's session. I hope you've enjoyed it. What I would like you to do is put in some of your comments down below, in the sections below, just to tell me what sort of leader you are, answer some of the questions that I've posed to you today, and what sort of leader you want to be in the future. Also, let's look at how you define your leadership. How do you define the people that are above you and below you? Do you see their leadership styles, and can you complement them leadership styles? Please put all your comments below, and I'd love to engage with you. Okay, please click and share, and I will see you next time.